one of the fun parlor games out there is to just kind of take a look and see what Warren Buffett is doing with all his cash. Is he buying? What's he buying? What's he selling? It's kind of a fun game we play. Matthew Palazzolo, he does that for a living. He's the senior analyst, covers the insurance business for Bloomberg Intelligence. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. What is Warren buying and selling these days?
So 13F just came out. Okay. It wasn't a ton that we didn't know was happening. I mean, they sold a lot of banks, sold a lot of bank stocks. So
really?
We knew
those banks were rallying here.
Well, we knew in October that he was paring down holdings of Bank of America. They went below the 10% reporting threshold, and I thought they'd probably sell more after that, which we did find out in the 13F that they did. So they own about 9% of the company now.
But he kind of has to, right? I mean, Bank of America is not as stark an example as Apple, but when you hold something that appreciates that much, it takes up a bigger and bigger piece of your balance sheet. So you don't want to have just an Apple fund or just a Bank of America fund. These stocks have been on fire.
Agreed. And so as a holder of Bank of America stock from my previous job, I was appreciative of that. But he's been very vocal about tax rates. So he thinks the U.S. tax rates going up, which maybe not now with the current administration.
In what world is that happening?
This was in the previous administration.
Okay.
He was thinking that U.S. tax rates go up and that he was going to take some money off the table was our view, which seems to have happened.
So how much cash does he have now to deploy?
So we're talking hundreds of billions, right, of cash. What has happened is their cash balance has ballooned because they sold a lot of Apple, they sold a lot of Bank of America. Their interest income could be $11 billion next year, just on the interest, short term. So I think it takes a ton of pressure off of them on this holding cash. Are they going to deploy it in stocks? I don't think so in the near term.
So he's not elephant hunting, as it were?
I mean, I think he's always elephant hunting. I just don't know if the elephant's out there. I mean, the one name that he bought in the quarter, new buy, was Constellation Brands, which is a beverage maker. I don't know a ton about them.
Modelo.
Yeah.
Corona.
He bought Domino's in the quarter before, so he's a pizza and beer kind of guy as opposed to banks. By the way, cut a ton of Citigroup stock as well. About 75% of the stock that they held in Citigroup they sold.
That's more understandable.
Yeah.
But the stock's been moving higher. So, I mean, again, are we at the point now with Berkshire Hathaway?
Dude, I put up Citi against like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bank America, Wells Fargo, and underperforming all of them.
It went downhill the day I left. So where do we go with the Warren story? I mean, I would argue that nothing's going to happen in his lifetime. That maybe when he passes, then maybe some of these new managers will change here and return cash or make some bigger acquisitions in areas that maybe he wasn't comfortable with.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I've been covering the company for 5 years now. We didn't cover it before in my previous job. In watching him, we lost Charlie Munger, right? His tone he's always been aware of his mortality and talked about that, but the tone is like, I am passing the torch, and that is just more and more apparent every year. So you got Greg Abel, who is the heir apparent CEO. Buffett will often praise his capital allocation skills, say he thinks like me. He was involved in the Japan investments they made. I do think he takes a fresh look at Berkshire. Maybe you get a dividend, maybe, and he's an energy guy, so maybe, they bulk up the energy operations. I don't know. But I think you probably see some change coming in the next regime.
It's amazing that this guy, pizza and beer, right? He drinks Coke all day long. He drinks multiple Coca-Colas.
So at the annual meeting, he would sit there with Munger. They would eat the See's candy and chase it with a Coke, and it made my teeth hurt just looking at the way they do it.
And he's 94 years old, and he's in fantastic shape. I mean, he's completely lucid, right?
He seems to be very sharp. At the annual meeting, he sits up there and answers questions for hours. I would say, look, completely understandably, he just seems older and kind of a little bit slower.
Again,
but
he's 94 years old.
Exactly, right? But, still incredibly sharp, great insights, and I could see him going for another couple of years. I don't know. It's a tough one to kind of gauge that, but I think he's still completely sharp.
Do we know how engaged he is, kind of day to day?
So he's been talking about he's passed a lot of the day-to-day to Greg Abel. So he said a big part of his job was fielding questions and giving, advice and operational advice to companies that Berkshire owns.
Okay.
They said he's essentially moved all of that stuff to Greg Abel. And in Ajit Jain's words, the head of the insurance operations, is he would very nicely do it, that they would call him and say, that sounds like a question for Greg, or, maybe I don't really know the answer. So he kind of nicely passed these things off. So I think he's probably strictly focused on the capital allocation, and the day-to-day operations have been passed on to Greg Abel.
Interesting, fascinating story. Obviously, been one of the greats of all time. Matthew Palazzolo, thank you so much for joining us. Senior analyst, covers all the insurance stuff for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio.